Welcome to the Underground, the Steel City Underground, the black and gold standard for Pittsburgh Steelers coverage. Now, here are your hosts, Joe Kuzma and Brian E. Roach.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of the Steel City Underground podcast. My name is Joe Kuzma, and joined by my trusty sidekick, actually more like cohort partner in crime. It might be a little bit past Christmas time, but I think of Home Alone when I think of you, Brian, and I think of the Wet Bandits. One, Brian E. Roach. What's up, Brian?
So I'm Joe Pesci in that little thing there because I'm the short one.
Yeah, that's probably how it's got to work out. I mean, I can't be Joe Pesci. I'm a monster, man. I'm 6'5". Yeah, it doesn't work that way.
That's actually good. Doesn't matter actually in this instance because they're both dumb.
It's very fitting. It's very fitting. Hey, we got accused of not getting to the point right away in a previous show. Apparently someone has never seen any of the late night talk shows where they have opening monologue. Everything's breaking news, and I don't know, I guess we kind of have. We're going to talk some breaking news. I'm finally with you. You and the professor once again on your AB sort of soapbox there. And we kept kicking the can down the road to talk about coaching changes. Lo and behold, something happened earlier in this week that is the major coaching change with the Pittsburgh Steelers. And there's a lot of folks out there that aren't quite understanding of the situation with one now former offensive line coach, Mike Munchak, even going as far as to saying he's one of the rats jumping off a sinking ship for taking what, quote, was a lateral move because he's taken the same position with the Denver Broncos. And he's basically come out there in interviews and we were saying this kind of in the back rooms. I was tweeting this. I had some articles in that up on the website. Just to the contrary of everybody knew he had family in Denver. This guy turned down potential head coaching jobs over the last 2-3 seasons. Arizona Cardinals wanted him last year. Miami Dolphins reached out and he declined. He didn't even go. I think the Cardinals, he at least maybe entertained or had dinner or something like that, which is what he did here with the Broncos. But he has family in Colorado, I guess Denver area, and his contract was up. And this is something where the Steelers weren't going to put a gun to his head and hold him hostage because everyone's like, why did the Steelers let him go? Trust me, I'm sure. Some people are trying to act like the Steelers are cheap. I don't think a guy like Mike Munchak, who is a Hall of Fame caliber player and basically been an executive or a coach at almost every level that there is when he was with the Houston. Well, I guess it got to be the / after Houston Oilers / Tennessee Titans. So, I mean, it's not like they let him go. This was something where I think it was kind of in the process, and we're going to talk in a few minutes about how the Steelers were preparing for it.
Yeah. I mean, Labriola in his Asked and Answered column on Steelers.com quoted Munchak from an interview that was done earlier, and he says the following: "As my career shows, when I get somewhere, I stay there. When this opportunity came up in Denver to work in a city with my daughter, her husband, my granddaughter, and my other daughter not far away in L.A., that's what we wanted. I'm not 30 or 40 years old anymore. I'm 58, and different things become important as you age. It was a family decision all the way. This was all about family from the beginning. If my daughter lived in Pittsburgh, I wouldn't have taken any head coaching interviews. I'd rather be a line coach here than a head coach anywhere else other than family." I mean, he's very clear.
Yeah, he is. And I believe somewhere, we joke about this. I said something about this on a previous episode of like priorities in life. And I said something like God, Steelers, then, wife and kid. And that's not the priority for Mike Munchak. So, I mean, Actually, I'm teasing. That's not really, Steelers don't go that high a priority, although they're almost sometimes feel like a fickle mistress or, some type of affair or something like that when you're, running and doing and watching games, going to games and all these other things and, putting telling, the wife that she's not a window, get out in front of the TV. But yeah, I mean, it's just these guys, they work all year round. I think that's another kind of misconception with coaches. The football players, the good ones do. They'll still be working in the off season. The ones that have short careers tend to not do that, and they just sit and become couch potatoes in the off season. But it's a full-time job. A little bit of a rest period here because it's not the grind of, sleeping on a couch over at the Steelers headquarters facilities, watching film and things of that nature, where you're basically, living in that building. Now, even Mike Tomlin gets a little bit of time with family, and Mike Munchak, he's probably seeing little ones grow up and things like that. Too, Brian, I'm going through a very similar phase in my life right now where it's very geared towards my 5-year-old daughter and things of that nature. So I can totally empathize with what Mike Munchak's saying. And, it's not like any of us are getting any younger. So you think he really wants to miss out on some of the better years. Now, he's still going to be busy, but it's not busy in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, Eastern time zone. You're 2 time zones removed from Mountain Time with Denver. So there's even a time difference if he wants to FaceTime or Skype or anything like that with a granddaughter. And there's nothing like just actually being there. So I'm totally with it. I hope, for some of our listeners there that weren't aware of this situation and just thought that, based on some of the other clickbait and sensational media that's out there that just, they're just trying to get your attention and get some advertising dollars out of you for your eyeballs on their articles or listing. It's just, they're full of it. They're full of baloney. So, this wasn't a move because Mike Munchak says, well, the Steelers suck. This is a sinking ship and I want out of here. I'll take any other job. That just simply wasn't the case.
No, absolutely not. I think that Munch really liked being in Pittsburgh. And I think that, pretty much anybody will tell you the organization it's a different organization. People like being there. It's a destination organization, in the sense that, people will leave other jobs for here. But when you start to, impact and take into account family, and like you said, how do you equate, when you're a 58-year-old guy, because I'm not quite Munchak's age, but I'm getting close. And
you're catching up.
I'm catching up. And you've got not only your own daughter, but your grandkids, and family in one location. And, as you said, while 2 hours may not feel like a huge difference in time, it is. It throws things off. It's not as easy to communicate. Certainly, it's not as easy to just go out and see them whenever you feel like it, because coaching is a full-time job. There is no question about that. These guys don't get time off. It's a full-time position. So it does make sense that if family has become a priority, which it often is for most people, and rightly so, that's the only reason he's leaving, is so he can be close to his family. It is. There's a lot of, we've talked about drama nonstop. This is not a drama thing,
no,
but it's being attempted to turn into a drama thing. Zach and I both said, this is not the Steelers blew this. This is not the Steelers made a mistake. This is not the Steelers missed out. This is simply a guy who wants to be close to his family.
Yeah, precisely. That's what I was saying by taking a jab at some would-be competitors, as you would call it, or something like that, where, we're not trying to be a news source or a breaking news source here. We're a supplement to the Steelers and their organization because, you know what, without them, we're not here, Brian. We're not talking about this type of stuff. So maybe we're talking about, the latest Marvel movie or something that's coming out instead. And nobody would be listening because there's like 1,000 people that do those type of things. But anyway, Tommy Jaggy, who one of our great contributors, analysts over on the website, Tommy's a busy guy, and he usually comes out with some I don't even want to say hot takes. Tommy is very statistics driven, very set in his ways with certain things, such as Bud Dupree, which I'm sure we're going to hear about some more. But he tells us why the Steelers are going to miss Mike Munchak, which is actually kind of funny because as Tommy put this together, he was actually putting it together as the Steelers got to do everything in their power to keep Mike Munchak, and then it was like, it was nearly completed. It's like you're doing that homework project, and then all of a sudden they changed the subject on you. But the statistics he pulled together were still pretty good. I'm going to read some of them off here as far as now. The only thing is it's missing from Tommy's kind of, what do you want to say, research project here is that the players or that the Steelers had on the offensive line. So when you go back to 2009, he goes for the previous 5 years of where they were run and pass block. So the first number I'm going to rattle off is run and then pass, and I'll do it from 2009 through 2013. So you got 13th and 28th, 19th and 29th, 3rd and 20th, 27th and 15th, 22nd and 15th. So not exactly great numbers. They were a good rushing football team in 2011. Everything else, they were like almost 20s or bottom of the league in pass block, which if you recall, this is actually pre-Todd Haley era as well, where Bruce Arians, who's famous for getting his quarterbacks hit like a piñata, did exactly that. The Steelers gave up 50 sacks in 2009. That to Mike Munchak's arrival, which also, I got to say, coincides with a few other things. You have Marquise Pouncey gets drafted. When was that? 2010.
Yeah.
And then you have Marcus Gilbert arrives as a second-round pick. Was that 2011? That was also Cam Hayward was the first-round pick then. 2012 was David DeCastro. So they spent some high-number picks to try and correct the issues with their offensive line. And I think some of that also coincides with Mike Munchak's hire.
Absolutely. And, there's no question Munchak was a great, maybe even the best offensive line coach in the league right now. There's no question that the Steelers will miss his services. I think that, they have the benefit of having a guy in Sean Surratt, or Surratt, I can't remember now. We had problems pronouncing
Surratt.
it.
Surratt, isn't it? Surratt? Surratt?
I don't know. We had to look it up the other day to find and listen to Missy Matthews say it.
Which is okay. This is a common theme with our show. We want to get everyone's names right and not sound like a bunch of stooges, but at the same time, it's like we don't have the pronunciation guide, or we haven't heard anyone mention anyone by name yet or properly. Like, how many times have people butchered Fichtner or Finkner?
Yeah.
Anytime I hear Charlie Batch say it, I'm like, I don't think he says it the same 2 times in the same program.
No, it's always a little. I'm just not good with names, and you're a little better, but you're not great, so it's okay. But the point I'm driving at here
is now hold on here. Now hold on.
Oh, don't
Mike
be
Tomlin.
offensive.
If Mike Tomlin calls somebody, if they call him Chooks or they call him Ola, I'm pretty sure the coaching staff has a problem with some of the names. It's either you get the guy. There's 2 things that'll always trip me, or maybe even 3 if you go with some Hispanic Latino names. But those are pretty straightforward. But if you get some of the kind of African-inspired names or the Polish names, that all bets are off there. There aren't very many Greeks in the NFL, so you don't have to worry about that in our line of work. But these are the guys with the long names that are kind of hard to pronounce sometimes. So all bets are off there. If you're somebody like Bob Smith, we got your back.
Yeah, that's fair. That's fair. Okay, so the point I'm trying to make with the coach here is that he's been with the organization 7 years, and he had 5 years under Munchak. So,
wait, who is this now?
Sean Surratt, the guy that they hired as the offensive line coach.
Okay, I'll just clarify.
Yes, and so you're not. You've got some consistency in the transition. The guys know him. He knows the guys. There's familiarity there. It's about the best solution they could hope for. And yeah, it's big shoes to fill, no question about it. But the lessons these guys have learned over the time Munchak was there are going to be reinforced by a guy who's been working with him and for him for that same amount of time. So, yes, it's unfortunate that this happened, but it just is one of those things. And as I said, the downside of being really good at what you do is other people will try and take you away from where you are. And this just happened to be a circumstance where it fit for him.
Yeah, and you know what? As I was talking about the sack numbers allowed, too, 2012 was actually the trending down. That was the Todd Haley arrival of, hey, Ben, stand in the pocket and pass it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And some of that culture also helps change it, as well as, some of the picks. I mean, you had Kelvin Beachum that came in. Mike Adams was supposed to be one of the guys, but Kelvin Beachum ended up being the left tackle, and then Alejandro Villanueva. Low round picks or undrafted guys. Ramon Foster already was on the roster, biting and clawing and fighting his way into a starting position during that previous 5-year span that I was already talking about. And so he's been a major part of this now next 5-year span that goes from 2014 through 2018, where the Steelers run pass block ranks are as follows: 6-14, 8-8, 3-4, 7-1, 15th and 4th. And that's just incredible. You look at the amount of sacks, 33, 33, 21, 24, and then 24 this past season. Ben is upright all the time. Adjusted sack rates, according to Tommy, the highest that the Steelers had in the last 5 years under Mike Munchak, 5.8%. Goes down to 5.4, 3.9, 4.6, and 4.4 versus 8.5, 8.6, 7.2, 6.3, and 7.3. Totally off the charts when it comes to keeping the quarterback clean. And I mean, I don't want to make it sound like Mike Munchak isn't responsible for that, because he certainly is. He's molded some of these guys like Matt Filer and BJ Finney, again, undrafted guys, into being starter capable type players. The Steelers haven't spent any high draft picks on offensive linemen. We're talking day 2s and day 3s, like a Gerald Hawkins or a Chooks Okorafor, the aforementioned. I almost sound like a telemarketer sometimes. So hopefully, I finally got Chooks right. I just won't go with his first name. And yeah, so I mean, it's like, when you look at it overall, what Tommy says here is the averages is with Munchak, they're 8th against the run versus 17th without him, 6th with the pass blocking as opposed to 21st without him. The offensive line or the run game, the yards attributed with this, 4.33 to 3.99, average of 43 sacks versus 27 with Munchak. And then, of course, the high adjusted sack rate of 7.6 versus 4.8. Needless to say, the Steelers are definitely going to be missing Mike Munchak as far as a coach. You talked about Sean Surratt. He actually arrived a year or two before Munchak was even here in the Steel City. So he's a guy that's he's been collecting some experience. The Steelers were bracing themselves for this transition because, face it, what has this been? Like the last 2 off seasons we've talked about teams trying to inquire and poach Mike Munchak as a head coach or for their organization. So the Steelers moved Coach Sean, I'll call him Coach Sean until we figure this thing out. They moved him over to assistant offensive line coach as an official title for 2018. And now he will fulfill, as you mentioned, Mike Munchak's role. So the crux of all of this program being today that a lot of people are crying for change with the Pittsburgh Steelers. Well, it might not be the change that you want, although a lot of people got their wish last offseason with the fire Haley chance. You might not get the fire Butler chance. You're not going to get the fire Mike Tomlin chance. We talked after the New England Patriots victory, myself and the professor, about all the reasons why you shouldn't want Mike Tomlin fired. And I think in the future here, we're going to talk about Keith Butler. We may gloss over a little bit today, but there's definitely change within the Steelers organization and the Steelers coaching staff over the previous 2, this offseason and the previous offseason leading into 2018. There aren't that many guys that are still sticking around, and it's because of results or lack thereof. And some of it is the Steelers kind of have this figured out to where Well, they don't necessarily fire people. They let the contracts kind of expire and then make that change. And that's because they try and avoid drama, and they also try and remain committed to people. Look, I don't enjoy seeing any coaches getting fired, no matter where it is, for all the reasons we've just mentioned with Mike Munchak, family. Some of these guys, they're younger than Mike Munchak. Some of them are older. So, but regardless, you're a traveling band. And, he's going from Pittsburgh to Denver. Some of these guys lose jobs. They're moving, East Coast to West Coast to East Coast, North to South, transitioning family, kids that are in school. Maybe they leave them where they are because they're ingrained in that community, and they don't want their kid to, yell at them. They're teenagers yelling at them about, I'm losing my friends, my boyfriend, my girlfriend, whatever. You know what I mean? There's a lot. There's financial things. There's finding a house. There's all these different things. And when you talk about players have like a little bit of a different – do you hear of coaches having agents? You know what I mean? They don't have like a sports agency working behind them. Like we've talked about this with down deal, and whether or not it was odd. I guess for some people they feel it's odd that Drew Rosenhaus was in contact with Mike Tomlin, and I was talking about how just Sean Davis, the Steelers safety, has his agents set up chefs for meal prep for him. Anything they can do so the player can just focus on football, these guys do. Well, coaches don't have this, so it's a lot more disruptive, and players have a little bit of an offseason. They're looking at film, they're helping with scouting, they're trying to figure out who should we try and retain for free agency, who are we trying to bring in that might be a free agent for another team, who are we trying to maybe see that we could target in a draft, what positions do we need help with. It is nonstop. So I don't relish the change, but to say that the Steelers aren't having changes because some fans out there, the Yinzers, as some of them we call, there's Yinzers we love and Yinzers we loathe, and the ones we loathe are the ones that act like toddlers, and they want Mike Tomlin fired, they want Keith Butler fired, and they fail to acknowledge that there are other changes going on within the organization.
Yeah, and this fire Butler narrative bothers me because it's accompanied by this idea that the Steelers defense is in the bottom of the league. That it is that last year the Steelers were a low-tier defense. But that's just not the case. I mean, look, facts are facts, right? Yes, the Steelers defense gave up some late drives, but the Steelers defense also got put in position to give up late drives at times by the offense. And, if you're going to claim that the Steelers defense is a low-end defense, was a low-tier defense in the bottom third of the league, you're just flat out wrong. Look, it was the Steelers were the number 6 overall team in overall defense. They were now I don't remember where I got 9 in pass defense, and they were in the top rush defenses too. They were 9 in rush. Look, this is a top 10 defense. So you cannot hold on to a narrative that Keith Butler stinks because his defense has been terrible. Let go of past years while this defense was growing. It's gotten better. It is a better defense than it was 2-3 years ago. And, they made some good plays over the time. Look, they stopped the Patriots at the end of a game. They did enough of a job against the Saints that they probably should have won that game. They went toe-to-toe with the Ravens in Baltimore and outperformed the Ravens defense there, and that was the number 1 defense in the league. You cannot keep holding on to a narrative that is invalid. So the fire Butler stuff was just unrealistic because he's not – the job he's done, while it may not be exactly what everybody wants – and we expect to be the top defense and we expect to be a shutdown defense, they don't have the players yet. I don't think anybody can anticipate Artie Burns sliding back as far as he did this year. And at the same time, you got Cody Sensabaugh, who everybody at the beginning of the year thought of as just a spare part that maybe would contribute a little bit, stepped up and did a better job than anticipated. But at no point could you say, the Steelers have the same talent level as you would have expected them to have if they're going to be a true shutdown defense. But they're getting close. They're getting better. And a lot of that is due to whatever Butler is doing. The schemes take a while for these guys to learn. Yeah, they got communication issues, but they are starting to iron those things out, and we'll see how the next year goes by. That whole narrative of fire Butler because the defense is a crappy defense, it bothers me because it has no basis in fact anymore.
Oh, absolutely. And let's not forget the fact that they were tied for league lead in sacks with 52 this season. And what was it, 56 last year, which was I'll pull it up here in a second. I think it was 56 was the number. That was a franchise record. No other Steelers team had put up the numbers that the 2017 Steelers defense did. Yeah, 56 was the number. Just fact checking here. Don't like to go off the top of my head, but yeah. To cover a couple of your points too is now all of a sudden Steelers, now we're headed towards the draft. Now they don't know how to draft. They suck at drafting. Artie Burns was bad. He was a first round pick. Now he's a bust, which we still don't know for sure yet. It takes time for some of these guys. You just never know when the light bulb's going to go off. Well, you always mentioned Troy Polamalu struggling in the beginning. Yep. The Steelers, like the guys that played in the front seven with Dick LeBeau, they didn't even realize actual playing time until almost the rookie contracts were expired. If they even did before their contracts were expired, it would be year 3 or year 4 before they would get on the field. And to say the Steelers are terrible at drafting when they have 3 guys in the Pro Bowl, I don't care if it's alternates or not. TJ Watt deserves to be there. Juju had a heck of a season, and James Conner is too. That's all 3 in 1 year, which could go down as maybe one of the better drafts since, like the 70s or something like that. So, yeah. But even looking at that over the years with the Steelers defense, how long did it take for things to really gel? How long did it take for Brett Kiesel to become a guy who was a consistent contributor and starter? Casey Hampton was drafted in 2001. Brett Kiesel was drafted in 2002. You got Troy comes along in 2003. You didn't even get Lawrence Timmons and Lamar Woodley and James Harrison as an actual starter as well until Mike Tomlin comes around in 2007. So those pieces weren't even coming together quite yet. Some of it was there and some of it wasn't. So it drives me kind of crazy. You also hear the narrative of Mike Tomlin inherited Bill Cowher's players. Well, did you like that he inherited Bill Cowher's coach? Because that's where Keith Butler come from. He was the linebackers coach, and more specifically, now he's going to deal with the outside linebackers because you want to change. Well, here you go. You're upset about Jarvis Jones being a bust in the past. A lot of people I defend Bud Dupree. I don't know that Bud Dupree is worth the $9 million he's going to be due on a 5th-year option on his, being a first-round draft pick that he's going to be due this season. You might be able to do some other things with that money. That I understand, but that's business versus, Bud Dupree not being a flat-out bust. He's not a player who completely sucks. But at the same time, don't lump him in with Jarvis. But do you see where there's position coaches that may be the scapegoat here? And that's why Joey Porter was like, oh, so you want change? Here's change. Joey Porter's out. Keith Butler now, since the Steelers only run their base 3-4 defense, maybe 20% of the time now, I think is the statistic. And they have a lot more defensive backs on the field, which we're going to get into with another coaching change here. Keith Butler is going to be overseeing the outside linebackers because let's put it this way, it's not really putting too much more tasks on his defensive coordinator job. Apparently he wants more of his imprint on that, and they're unhappy with development. And when you look at someone like Bud Dupree who's shown flashes, you could certainly argue that. TJ Watt comes in. Okay, TJ Watt, he's a Watt. It's in their blood, man. There aren't any other Duprees running around playing in the NFL. There's 2 other Watts that are pro football players. I think that says something to just genetics and, how these guys were bred basically to be football players. But, you have various other examples throughout the years, and you're going to have a guy that steps on the field immediately like a Watt or a Lamar Woodley that's going to get it done. You're going to have other guys where it's going to take time. James Harrison didn't step on the field right away either. So to just say that the defense sucks and you need to fire all these guys, okay. And we're going to get into the secondary in a second because they've recognized the secondary as a problem because guess what? The only guys that are still there on the staff, Keith Butler, when we're going back from before 2018 now. So Keith Butler's still there as the defensive coordinator. Jerry Osavsky's still there as the inside linebackers coach. Everyone else they have made changes or in the process of making changes.
Yeah, I want to go back to the drafting thing too, real quick, just because the expectation that every draft pick you're going to make is going to pan out is absurd, and it doesn't. Yeah, Jarvis Jones, I think we can fairly say, was a bust. It was a reach, and maybe Artie Burns turns into that too. We don't know for sure yet, but when you complain about these draft picks, look, the truth is your best surefire draft picks are in the top 15 picks, and even people miss then too. But the Steelers haven't had the luxury of picking that high since Ben got here. They're not picking in the top 15. It just doesn't happen because they're competitive every year. So they're making do with really what are low end first round picks and potentially second round picks. And you've got to, look, maybe there's a tight end that slides all the way down there, but you don't need a tight end. So you got to find the best person on your board that fits, and sometimes that means that you reach. It just happens. And
yeah, and
yep.
Ryan Shazier, by the way, was the last highest pick that they had at 15.
Yeah. It just doesn't happen very often. So, you got to kind of hope some of these players pan out, and a lot of them have. You've got guys like Cam Hayward and Stephon Tuitt. You've got Javon Hargrave. You've got guys who are panning out, especially on the defensive side. But there's this narrative that they don't know how to develop corners and they don't know how to draft corners. It's hard to draft solid, decent corners when you're always picking in the low end of the draft. It just is.
Yeah, and that's going to be a whole other show as we get close to the draft too, because we were just looking at all of these previous drafts over the last 3-4 years and how many of these corners, even outside the first round. We talked about quarterbacks. We were banging our drum on that for the last few years. Holy cow, the corners are about as bad as far as success rate. Even a first-round pick doesn't guarantee you anything. And not to really cut off on that, though, Brian, you were mentioning a defensive lineman there and your favorite people, your grown-ass men up front.
Absolutely.
3 or 4 horsemen. The 3-4 horsemen.
Hey.
That's an even better name. Wow.
I like it.
Yeah, that's going to work. But Carl Dunbar takes over this season, heading into 2018, this past season, I should say. John Mitchell, longtime defensive line coach, very much old school, old-time NFL guy that's been around, coaching 40-plus years, dating all the way back to joining the Steelers with Bill Cowher, maybe a year or two after Cowher arrived. And he's been the assistant head coach ever since Mike Tomlin has come into Pittsburgh in 2007. He stepped aside just to do only the assistant head coach role. And Carl Dunbar is the guy who was basically the defensive line factory down in Alabama. That's where he came from. And we saw some improvements with that this year, I want to say. It's hard to say you could see improvements with Cam Hayward. We already saw the flashes with Stephon Tuitt, but Javon Hargrave, he had a pretty solid season, and I like what I saw even from Dan, getting something out of Dan McCullers, where we thought, that ship had sailed, and it really didn't for what little playing time. He actually got playing time, and what little he got, he impressed, at least, for what he is. He's a large man. It's meant to plug the middle. The Steelers don't do a whole lot of that, as prefaced by saying they only do the base 3-4 about 20% of the time. So here you go. They changed the defensive line last year with the coaching. They made a shift there. They're making a shift this year with at least the linebackers by saying c'est la vie with Joey Porter. For whatever reasons, there may be off-field stuff there too. We're not going to speculate. Doesn't matter. His contract was up. He's not going to be back for 2019.
Right.
Now, the secondary, the defensive backs. Oh, my God, they're so terrible. They can't do this. They can't do that. This wasn't exactly the previous year where I remember, Mike Mitchell, or even going back a few years with Will Allen and guys trying to get on page, even with Troy Polamalu in his final year or two. And then you had, Will Allen and Shamarko Thomas and guys. This wasn't the same type of safeties back there. They weren't giving up the same type of big plays. They let Carnell Lake go heading into 2018. And they brought in now his
Tom
name's
Bradley.
escaping me, Tom Bradley, and now they're also bringing in someone who has defensive coordinator experience with more than one team, and also was responsible for coaching the secondary for I believe 3 seasons with the Baltimore Ravens, and Terrell Austin. And the reason for that is that 20%, because you have more defensive backs on the field. It's like having too many kids in a classroom. You got to split it up and have the right student to teacher ratio. And so now they're going to actually have 2 coaches, and for all intents and purposes, the word on the street is one will take care of corners and one will take care of safeties. I'm not really sure how it's going to work, because you got the dime backer roles, and you got the nickel, dime, dollar, quarter. You got all these different packages that they're doing where you have like maybe 7 DBs on the field at one time, and it may be a little overwhelming communication wise. With one guy trying to relay all of that stuff. So this is where Terrell Austin comes in, but you also have to look at the job that I think that Tom Bradley's done. And you mentioned it already with Cody Sensabaugh having a very solid year. It's going to be interesting to see where his future lies as far as with the Steelers and whatnot. Joe Hayden is Joe Hayden. He looks like he's Pro Bowl form once again. You have some plays where you're just going to get beat, or you have really controversial, crappy pass interference calls that I'm still not going to get over. That's about as bad as Jesse caught it. Did I say that before? Yes, I have, and will continue to say it.
Yes, you have.
Jesse also caught it. Joe did not push off. But I like what we're seeing. We also saw that Mike Hilton was one of, or maybe the highest graded guy of Pro Football Focus as a nickel corner. Some stat that come across the wire like that. So to say that the Steelers secondary is just horrible, you got Terrell Edmonds, who's first-year player, rookie. He's learning and growing. Sean Davis, first year in that role. Here's a guy that I think is underrated too, because you look at what the coach has been able to do with him. You're a rookie. You're going to start as a nickel back or a nickel corner, not nickel back. Oh dear Lord, no. Then and then a nickel corner. And then you know what? Halfway through the season, Will Gay is going to slide over there. We're going to let Artie Burns start, and we're going to move you over to strong safety. And then this year, the 2018, we're going to move you to free safety. And he's done everything that they've asked of him, and he's done fairly well with that as well. He's very versatile, very athletic, and some of this has to be coaching, because how do you just take a guy and shift him around like that? So just to say that the secondary is terrible, I think they'll still have some focus there. It's not to say that if they see somebody that's going to improve the team, that they're going to just pass on that. That's not how it works with anything. With this, trust me, they have what's his name, Matt McCrane, the kicker. They signed him to an additional year. He's coming to camp to compete with Boswell, because if they think they can get better at a position, they're going to do it. So don't think of it that way. Just think of it from the aspect of you want things shaken up. You wanted Haley gone. Okay, you got your wish there. You want Keith Butler gone. You're not going to get that wish, because they're making a lot of other moves in different directions with positional coaches in trying to shore up what appears to be a talented defense that's definitely trending upward.
Yeah, I think. Look, the narrative that change for change's sake just doesn't make sense. And again, I think it's important to slow our roll about what the defense has been and what it actually is now. And if you're going to do that, if you're going to acknowledge that this defense is better than it was, then you have to acknowledge that Keith Butler is a part of that process and has helped make it better than it was. Do they still have breakdowns sometimes? Yes. Do they still have miscommunications sometimes? Yes. So does everybody else. Look, the Patriots give up big plays. The Saints give up big plays. Everybody has communication breakdowns. It's not just a Led Zeppelin song, okay? It really happens, and it happens to everybody. You've got a defense out in Los Angeles with the Rams that, it's got Ndamukong Suh and Aaron Donald and Marcus Peters and all these guys that they went out and spent huge amounts of money. Guess what? They were not the top defense in the league. They have all these all-pro players, and they weren't even close to the top defense in the league. Everybody has issues. This has been a consistently improving unit, and that's about all you can ask for with especially where they draft and how they go. And it's not being apologetic, and it's not making excuses for the team. It's just reality. It just is.
Yeah, and to put a bow on all this is I've mentioned Todd Haley's name several times. Everyone got their wish. Randy Fichtner took over as offensive coordinator. Ben threw more passes than ever, more completions than ever, and led the league in interceptions. And I know you're going to tell me it's the least amount of interceptions that anyone's thrown, while leading the league in interceptions in NFL history. And while that may be true, he still led the league in interceptions. And does that just mean every quarterback got better, or is it just that a lot of first-round picks were sliding in and people didn't have as many attempts? TD to interception ratio, Jared Goff was worse off. So once again, we're kind of leading into the championship weekend and potential Super Bowl. We're looking at some cracks with the Rams, and we're not even trying to do that. But Randy Fichtner also was the quarterback's coach, and he still is that. And I'm kind of wondering if some of these offensive assistants, or if they don't, they were saying they weren't going to be any more subtractions. This was Art Rooney II's presser the other day. They're not getting rid of anybody else on the coaching staff, and that was kind of like the writing on the wall when Mike Tomlin sent a bunch of these guys, including Keith Butler, down to the Senior Bowl that's going on right now, or East-West Shrine Game, or any of these events. He sent them to one of the events and to scout, incoming potential NFL players. On the offensive side of the ball, I only worry that you got two young quarterbacks, and Randy Fichtner's trying to, maintain the entire offense. And I get it, he's Ben Roethlisberger's buddy, and you get some things, that go Ben's way. I didn't have a problem with the offense. Some of the play calling I thought was fantastic. It didn't seem as boneheaded. We need to see more. I don't like getting away from the run. There's always going to be criticism no matter who it is. But some of the things that were criticized this year, as far as, Ben throwing picks or this and that, that would have been Fire Haley the year before. So that's the thing that kind of boggles my mind. The only other guy that stuck around through this whole thing you're talking about 2 off seasons, we're including this one as well, just as a reminder, James Daniel, the tight end coach. They have changed over. Richard Mann retired, who was the wide receivers coach, responsible for, I can't say he's responsible for everybody, because he hadn't actually been the wide receivers coach with the Steelers for all that long. They've already had, Antonio Brown was already on the roster and guys like that. But definitely still, when you're talking about Mike Munchak and some of the players already being there as, draft picks too with the offensive linemen, coaching can take some credit for that as well. And of course, Sean Sarrett taking over for Munchak. Daryl Drake took over for Richard Mann as the wide receivers coach. And now the Steelers announced a new running backs coach. We knew James Saxon was already, I don't want to say shown the door. His contract expired as well. A lot of people, they didn't know why that was. But James Saxon also came in a year after Le'Veon Bell. And how much of the running game success is also tied to the offensive line talent? You'd be the judge. I don't know. So they felt that there needed to be a change there. Mr. Rooney said the same. So Eddie Faulkner comes over. For those of you who aren't familiar with the name, the NC State running backs coach, responsible for Mr. Touchdown, as I like to call him, Jalen Samuels. So you look at James Daniels, the only guy that you go back to 2017, everybody else is gone from that offensive room. These are all different coaches. Most of the defensive guys are different coaches. The Steelers are certainly making change, as I called it. I wrote some of this in an article, for better or worse. The worst part we won't know yet until we can reflect a few years from now.
Absolutely. And that's always the case. We were not going to know for sure. You never know for sure how a draft class is going to pan out. You never know for sure how coaching changes are going to pan out until you've had time to reflect on them. So now, we've had changes the last couple years. It's all good. As far as we know, we're looking forward, and we'll see. We'll see if these changes have an impact on the field next season. There's not much else we can do.
Yeah, that's exactly it. So you want to change, you got change. And like I said, for better or worse, that change is coming to Pittsburgh. I know some people want the head guy out. They don't like the fact that, he hasn't had it's vanity stats, so hasn't had a losing season. But we'll be talking more in the upcoming episodes about, drafts. Steelers can't draft players. That's kind of a myth. Can't develop players. Well, they grab guys off the street that don't even play fullback. He took a nose tackle and made a Pro Bowl fullback out of Roosevelt Nix. They did the same thing with a guy who was a defensive end named Alejandro Villanueva and made him a Pro Bowl left tackle. So we're going to be talking about some of those things. Where does that lie on coaching? Does it lie on some of the coaches that have already gone? Does it lie on some of the coaches that are still here? You can only be the judge after we see what this ends up looking like. But I am excited for Terrell Austin to be here in the Steel City. I think he's going to be a tremendous change going forward and help the secondary, and some of these other coaches too come in with a high pedigree. So it's going to be, change is coming. We may see some changes with players as well as the personnel. So we're going to keep looking at that through the coming weeks. Stay tuned to that. Don't forget to subscribe. Don't forget to follow us on social media and all that good jazz. And once again, Brian, thank you for joining me and all of our listeners today.
It's always a pleasure. And get the bell on, get the notifications on so that you get told when we have a new podcast up.
Yeah, because you know what? Well, hopefully we're not slacking heading into the coming weeks. But you know what? We try to come to you twice a week, bare minimum, early in the week and then late in the week like we are right now. So we'll always try and keep that for you. And, of course, a few of you in the comments have asked about specific topics. We're still going to get to that. Some of you have even mentioned that we haven't talked a lot about whether or not Ben is a source of drama and the big diva in Pittsburgh, and that's going to be coming soon as well. So until next time, my name is Joe. His name's Brian. We encourage everyone to be safe, be good, and we'll catch you later.
We would like to thank you for listening and remind our listeners to follow us on social media and our website, www.steelcityunderground.com.